an elderly man crossed the street and lifted his head to carefully look at a neon sign of a 5-star hotel. Dragging his feet and wearing a pair of old shoes, the old man opened the door and entered the hotel, the lobby of which sparkled with crystal. A young lady sat at the reception. With a bored look on her face, she spoke with someone on the phone. At first, she didn't even notice the strange visitor. She likely thought that it was a homeless person who entered an elite establishment to ask for money from the hotel's visitors. But when the old man, who was wearing clothes that were mended in many places, began to approach her, she visibly tensed up. The stranger's pitiful look was completed by an old hat that was completely worn out. It seemed like it was about to come apart at its seams. "Good evening. I would like to book a room. Would that be possible?" said the old man politely. He also took out an old wallet, preparing to take out cash. "The hotel is completely booked and will remain so," said the receptionist in a cold tone of voice, while looking through a fashion magazine. After the receptionist's hard words, the man's lips started to quiver, and the corner of his eyes began to fill up with tears. Afterwards, having mustered up the courage, the man looked at the name of the receptionist on her name tag and said, "Amanda, trust me, I have had a very long journey. I don't have energy to look for other accommodations, and I can see that you have at least 10 empty rooms." A row of keys hanging in their place did not escape the tenacious gaze of the old man. "You have to understand, we don't have a room for people like you here. This isn't a cheap hostel or a homeless shelter. This is a 5-star hotel. We value our reputation and cannot afford to risk it by giving shelter to suspicious people," said Amanda, who was getting very frustrated with the old man. "So, then call the general manager. I did not rest for a long time, and all I'm asking is for you to let me stay at the hotel. Even the worst room in the hotel will do," said the old man in a quivering voice. At that moment, a manager approached the reception to see what was going on. Amanda quickly summarized the problem to Howard Smith, making sure to make meaningful eye contact with him. The manager understood the problem right away and pointed the old man to the door. To his great surprise, the old man refused to leave. He appealed to the conscience of the staff who did not want to call the general manager. The matter ended when the manager called the doorman, who grabbed the old man and began dragging him towards the door. "James, wait. Take him out the back door. We don't want this hobo scaring away all of our guests," Mr. Smith declared in a businesslike manner. The doorman obediently led the old man through the back room, where he came face to face with Betty, the hotel dishwasher. When she saw the giant James using force on the old man, the woman couldn't hold back and said, "Leave him alone. What do you want from him? Can't you see he's not feeling well?" The doorman gave her a sly smile and let go of the old man. "If you're so caring, why don't you deal with him? I'm washing my hands of this. Anyway, I don't get paid to deal with hobos and the other miserable people," said James, and resolutely headed back to his position by the door. On his way, the doorman wondered how this beggar was even able to slip inside. Meanwhile, Betty touched the old man's shoulder and asked, "What's your name?" "Don't worry, my husband is about to come pick us up. My shift ended and I can help you." "Thank you. I appreciate that so much. As for the name, you can call me Mr. Stewart," said the old man, taking out of his pocket a bottle of pills to ease his headache. In the meantime, some of the hotel's female workers came up with what they thought was a hilarious joke. When they saw Betty in the company of the poorly dressed man, they said, "Betty, we understand that your husband is not of the highest quality, but we don't think this suitor can give you a bright future either. You'd be a widow in a matter of days." Betty didn't say anything, but she was offended and blushed a lot. When they were outside, Stewart asked Betty why her husband was considered second-rate. The woman got embarrassed, but then, overcoming her worries, told her story. It turns out that her husband, Henry, was disabled. He had lost his leg as a result of a terrible accident at a construction site. The man's leg was crushed by a heavy concrete block, which was not properly secured because of his employer's negligence. Unfortunately, the doctors could not save Henry's leg, but the man did not despair and believed in a bright future. The man had a difficult childhood, which he spent behind the walls of a group home. Betty and he did not have children. They lived in a shack in an underserved part of town. Henry's only prized possession was an old Ford, for which the couple saved dollar by dollar for over 2 years. The determined man used the car to work as a courier. When Betty saw her husband's approaching car, she breathed a sigh of relief and winked at the old man. "Will your husband be against my presence in the house?" asked the old man worriedly. "Of course not. My husband Henry is the best person in the entire world. I'm sure he'll like you," Betty responded and laughed. Soon, all three were in the car on their way to the small house of the Robinsons. Betty's husband really did turn out to be a very pleasant man with whom you could talk just about anything. To Stuart's great surprise, Henry never complained about life, even though he often suffered from back pain because of the injury that he had sustained. Their interesting conversations made the evening fly by. The old man realized that it had been a long time since he had had such a pleasant time. The Robinsons convinced the old man to spend the night even though he protested. The next morning, Mr. Stewart woke up with the first rays of sun and immediately turned to Henry with a strange request. He asked if he could be driven back to the very hotel from which he was recently kicked out so unceremoniously. Henry was understanding of Mr. Stewart and immediately drove him back. When they arrived, the old man headed straight for the back entrance, which at that point was already familiar to him. In the lobby, he ran into Amanda, who was serving the general manager in an eager-to-please manner. After catching a glimpse of the already familiar old man, the girl was dumbfounded for a second and then promptly started asking him to leave. But to her great surprise, Mr. Stewart suddenly started talking to the general manager, who lost all color in his face. "Martin, please tell me what's going on here. When I put you in charge of the staff, I didn't want arbitrariness and lawlessness to reign here. I actually had the intention of appointing you to be the manager of several of my New York hotels," said the old man, who turned out to be the owner of an extensive chain of hotels. Not knowing what to say, Martin and Amanda began to apologize profusely and smile in an ingratiating manner, but Mr. Stewart was relentless. "Yesterday, you didn't even bother listening to a client who came to you with a request. In our business, this is absolutely unacceptable. You are heartless and don't have even a drop of compassion. That's why I am dismissing you and all of the service personnel. I don't want to see any of you in my hotel. The only exception is Betty Robinson, for whom you couldn't even find a job better than a dishwasher, Martin," the owner of the hotel said sternly, while showing his employees to the door. The thing is that Mr. Stewart had already received several complaints about the poor treatment of customers at his hotel. Since he didn't want to believe rumors, he decided to check out the situation for himself. That's why the elderly businessman decided to play dress-up and see for himself if his customers were right to complain. The very next day, a serious-looking man appeared at the house of Betty and Henry Robinson with a large stack of documents in his hands. In a pleasant tone of voice, the man announced that he came on behalf of Mr. Stewart and that he had news that would make the couple happy. It turned out that Mr. Stewart paid for a 3-month course of treatment for Henry and ordered him 3 prosthetic legs of the latest models that served different purposes. What's more is that the grateful business bought the Robinsons a nice cottage in an elite part of town and a luxurious car. When Betty said that they didn't deserve such expensive gifts, the man replied, "What Mr. Stewart is giving you is a very tiny portion of his wealth, akin to a grain of sand in the vast desert. You, on the other hand, were giving up a much larger portion of what you have when you gave him food and shelter. Trust me, my boss does not take such things for granted, accept his gifts, and always remain good people." Henry and Betty could not believe their fortune. For a long time, they continued to watch the man as he walked away. In their minds, they thanked Mr. Stewart, who happened to cross their paths and acted like a good wizard towards them.